As immigrant women with big dreams and intricate migration upbringing, coupled with a complex historical background, Vietnamese women go through a lot. We have a lot of internal conflicts that we battle as we grow up about who we are, what value systems do we hold, how much traditional family values do we hold on to, and then how much of the quote unquote like westernized culture do we let go of. And it's all very confusing and it's lonely at times to try to build your dream life when you don't feel like you belong neatly in one world or another. In this episode, we'll try to answer those questions about how do you stay grounded to build your dream life and how do you navigate all the emotional, cultural, family challenges to live like a regular, quote unquote, regular 20-something, 30-something years or so. With that, welcome to Viet Boss Space, a Vietnamese podcast for modern Viet women around the world to listen, learn, and thrive in their daily lives. I'm your host, Mia Nguyen, and in this episode, I'm joined by Ca Dao, a Viet Boss babe born and raised in Saigon, who moved to Oklahoma at 11 years old, right? And then currently living in New York City. So her career background is in cybersecurity and corporate cyber insurance, and she's currently working on the treasury team as a program lead at Google. Ca Dao is passionate about advocacy and community, both of which are rooted in her Vietnamese upbringing. She built a nonprofit newsroom called The Interpreter, where volunteers translated U.S. news articles into Vietnamese for immigrant elders. And currently, she hosts a monthly rooftop Viet dinner called Hồng Dao around New York City. And she is a proud Viet Boss babe who finds inspiration in building a just world for all. So it's a beautiful introduction. I'm so excited for this conversation. And thank you so much for joining us, Ca Dao.
Thank you so much, G. Happy to be here and so honored
Yeah.
that I'm getting to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, so I think to kick us off and share a little bit more lights with the audience about like your story and like your migration upbringing. And yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah, lots of ground to cover here.
Yeah.
And just wanted to thank you for the great introduction. And Saigon is such a beautiful city, so cosmopolitan. I do have to make a quick correction that I'm actually from a coastal city called Nha Trang.
And then do you visit like Nha Trang often?
Ooh, so I've actually got the chance to visit Nha Trang twice now,
Hmm.
or actually a few times since 2019, trying to
Yeah.
make it like a yearly pilgrimage because I still have my
Mm.
grandpa there on my dad's side, and các cô chú ở bên nhà ba là đều còn ở Nha Trang với lại ở Sài
Hmm.
Gòn.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I feel really lucky to have a reason to always come back and revisit.
That's so beautiful. And I'm like, we'll dive into that a little bit more. And then, so tell me a little more about like, how has life been in New York City from Nha Trang to Oklahoma and then New York City,
Yeah.
or like, and then, California, and then here you are. Yeah. Do you identify yourself more as like a West Coast girly or like an East Coast girly?
These are great questions, by the way, and have you ever been in New York? Have you ever, like,
Yeah,
visited?
I was in New York back in June and I really love it. It's
Oh, okay.
very similar to Toronto,
Mm,
but like just much bigger. Like for example,
totally.
for context, in Toronto, we have streets called like Ossington, Queen Street, which is
Mm,
equivalent to Brooklyn, and then
yeah,
our downtown, the Wall Street is equivalent to like Bay Street, and all of
okay.
that like is like you can walk that within like an hour, but you cannot walk
Wow.
that in New York City. It would take, like,
Absolutely not.
1
It's
day.
like a whole it's a day-long,
Yeah.
like, endeavor to do
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
But it's
It's
interesting
so
because I
big.
only have,
Yeah.
like, Mono as the 6, which
Mhm.
is courtesy of
Like
Drake.
Drake. Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's nice to hear the actual, like, comparison,
Mhm.
but I think another point of luck for me has been with my academic upbringing from USC, there are so many West Coast folks with East Coast aspirations, right? So, I'm
Yeah.
not the first, for sure. So many people from my school and, like, from neighboring schools like UC Berkeley, UCLA
Mhm.
folks have also found their ways here in a
Mhm.
variety of careers like consulting, tech, finance, etc. And
Yeah.
so I was able to kind of quickly form a community just from my network at USC. And at the same time, I've always been a very community-minded person. Through my work at The Interpreter, I was able to form those foundational connections with the Viet community here and expanded those networks from my time as the host of my dinner
Yeah.
club, Hồng Dao. So it's been great. I think in order to fully enjoy New York, you really do have to kind of make that effort to build out these connections and because that's really where the magic is for New
Mhm.
York is the kind of people that you get to come across and foster, like, friendships with.
And then tell me a bit about more about Hồng Dao. Also, I love that, like, cause you have, like, Southern accent and so it's, and we just, like, pronounce it so differently, but it's, like, the same word.
I
Yeah, but tell
know.
me about the name behind Hồng Dao. Why do you name
Mm.
it that? And then when did you start?
Yeah, great question. So, uh, it's funny that you brought up, like, the difference in the regional
Yeah.
accent because being from, like, OC, I have family in OC because my mom's
Mhm.
family is there.
Yeah.
Like, everyone there speaks in a Southern accent, right?
Yeah.
And that it was never in the minority until I moved here, and I've met so many, like, successful people or Viet folks
Yeah.
in finance, and everyone knew each other because there's such a
Yeah.
strong Hanoi community here.
Yeah.
It's really cool to open up my social horizon,
Mm.
but I'm definitely in the minority in this city for the first
Yeah.
time, so it's just interesting.
Mhm.
And back to Hồng Dao, and so, Hồng Dao is sort of a part of my name, made up with the other half being, like, my original founder. Her name is Rose, and we just
Mm.
kinda translated that to home, uh, which is, the word
Yeah.
for "wool" in Vietnamese, and it's sort of a faithful, follow-up to the way that a lot of tiệm phở hay là nhà hàng ở Việt Nam, they name their
Yeah.
shops. It's just
It's
like
always
phở,
like
mì
mom
chao.
and dad. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
it's
first
like
name,
phở.
first name. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And
Yeah.
so, really not, like, a deep reason for the name, but I would say that it is sort of a continuation or realization of where I stand with my connection to being a Vietnamese person, um, on a more, like, strategic level. The the club is sort of thriving because there's not a lot of, um, there's a demand, right, for
Mhm.
Vietnamese food in the city, which is pretty unique compared
Yeah.
to the other cities with a large Vietnamese population, like Houston or, cities in Orange County. So
Yeah.
it's been a great opportunity for sure.
I saw the Instagram, like I saw the menu. It looks so amazing. I can't believe you guys do all of that together. It's such a meaningful way to foster community and connect to your roots. And also just like connecting with other Vietnamese folks in the city as well. Cause
Yeah.
being in a big city like New York, it can get very overwhelming. And even for
Yep.
people who just moved recently to New York or not, I think it's such a good way to celebrate a part of your identity too. Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
Uh,
absolutely. So I guess, like, to build off of, like, what you said about community, um, I think food obviously is, like, such a big, connector in our community, right?
mhm.
And so I guess the way that I would connect it back to my journey personally is this quote, like, "Cái của nào trời trời trao của đó."
Yeah.
And it's an extreme way to express kind of my relationship with the community, but I
Mm,
think a lot of my parents kind of influenced me growing up in the sense that, you know, a lot of our community's perception of Vietnameseness is like, the communities that you do hay là phức tạp
mm,
and like live away from that and to kind of graduate from that Vietnameseness
yeah.
is like a mark of personal progress, right? Or like a
Mm,
milestone to achieve.
yeah, yeah,
But I mean, growing up, I feel like I've never quite shaken off that Vietnamese-ness,
yeah,
but on the other hand, I, like, kind of lean into that identity that made me feel, more belonged,
yeah,
especially when we live in such, you know, an individualized and sometimes lonely existence,
yeah,
that identity is sort of a saving grace, right? Or like a safe harbor, and so that desire to seek out, like, collectivism and a community,
mhm.
um kind of helped me initiate these sorts of spaces.
That's really funny that you said, quote unquote, like graduated from the Vietnamese-ness community because when I first moved to Toronto, I get the same
Mhm.
narrative. Like My parents
Mhm.
are like, kiểu, đi du học thì phải đi chơi với Tây, or like
Đúng, đúng.
learn the quote unquote good things from the Westerners, right? Why would you come all the way to Canada and then like go hang
Mhm.
out with the Viets, right?
Yep.
It's just a funny narrative because like over the past 9 years now, I've just find
Mhm.
myself like slowly looking
Mhm.
for that community, like basically returning to what my
Yeah.
parents said to graduate from. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and, like, it's so funny because once you're part of the Vietnam communities, it's like, yo, they're like, yo, like, it's so dramatic. It's so everyone is so nosy, but it's so fun. It's dramatic because people care. If I need help, I can message them and,
Yeah.
like, someone will reliably showed up. And so I think that's such a beautiful thing. And when it comes to like
Mhm.
spaces over the
Mhm.
past years, like I've found myself to go to temples more often as a way to
Mm.
return or find that space.
Yeah.
Growing up, like we have a lot of rituals. We go Nile and like we go to temples a lot and all of that. But like as a kid, I'm like, why am I here? Like I don't need to be here. But then once I come to Toronto, I realized like, wait, I don't have this anymore.
Yeah.
Like no one is telling me what to do to stay close to the community. And so I find myself subconsciously go to
Right.
temples more often, especially during Lunar New Year, like Tết and Trung Thu. Like I try to go twice a year now as a way to stay connected because I know that this is the ritual that my parents are doing and I'm doing at the same time and the same hours of not same hours, but just like the same period of time, even
Yeah.
while we're like apart. So yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting, and thank you for sharing that with me. I actually identify with that a lot, and it makes me curious, like, we both are arguably part of in a stage in life where things are kind of cementing for us, right? Like
Yeah.
career-wise, socially, except for the fact that we're enacting like a change in life
Mhm.
and like going back to seek out this sort of spiritual connection that we've maybe previously never recognized or never
Yeah.
appreciated as in this specific time in life,
Yeah.
right? And I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, what is it about being in the late 20s, early 30s that are
Mhm.
impact like making us have this change of mindset?
Yeah, that's so interesting. The way that I guess where I would like solidify it is that the
Mhm.
early 20s are for experimentation, right?
Mhm.
It's for discovering who you are, trying on many different hats. When I was in my early 20s, I joined different clubs, I joined different political belief groups just to like try on many things. I have a lot of close friends who are like born and raised in Canada. And then I also have friends who are first generation immigrants. I feel like the early 20s is for experimentation and it feels very scary to do those because it just feels like you don't have a base to return to. You're really trying to experiment and answering the question of like, who am I? If without my default association,
Wow.
right? And then over the years, now that we are in our like late 20s, early 30s, who
Mhm.
are now we're have done the experimentation and now we're looking
Mhm.
to build our own base. And I find
Mhm.
myself returning to the initial home base a lot, but also like incorporating the things that I really like about, like, the new life with my Vietnamese traditions and family values. So it's like a mesh
Mhm.
back that's just me.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that.
yeah, yeah.
That is so profound, and I definitely relate so much. I think you articulate perfectly sort of the journey to discovery, that a lot of Viet people experience.
Mhm.
I think something that happened to me in the past week, um, to be a little TMI, I had asked my dad to share with me this cook theme when I was, like,
Wow.
a little baby, like, 2 freshly born to, like, 1 year
Mhm.
old. And I was watching it over and over, not to be, like, narcissistic, but literally to, like, revisit the past when my grandma was there, when my parents were still young, and just to see this sort of collectivist effort to raise a
Yeah,
child, right?
yeah.
Not something that you get to see a lot here, due to a variety of reasons, like
Mhm.
childcare policy, parental leave, all of those things, right? That are kind of emblematic of
Yeah,
the Western way of life.
Yeah.
And I had this, like, sudden burst of, like, belated grief. Sort of this grief that I had for maybe a life in Vietnam that I
Mm,
didn't get to live. Like a
mm,
life where a different, priorities would have been possible, maybe a little messier, because of that collectivist nature and how people are enmeshed together, like you
yeah.
mentioned. But it was something to experience, and letting that sadness, like, wash over me, right? But at the same time, you know, feeling so lucky that you get to have this fallback, this safe
Mhm.
haven,
Mm,
like, mentally or spiritually to
yeah.
ground yourself.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's like so a very vulnerable thing to share to the audience. So they always say like, don't be sad that it's over, right? Be happy that it happens. And I think that
Yeah.
sadness or the feeling of grief in this sense of like grief of memories or grief of what should have also indicates that it was beautiful. It was so beautiful that you reminisce. So I think that was like a natural transition to one of our themes that I wanted to chat with you about is like navigating the world as a Vietnamese woman who is going through her 20s and heading to her early 30s. I feel like we
Mhm.
all have very chaotic journey to get to
Yeah,
where we are,
to
even
say the
though
least.
so yeah, I'm like, even though so far, I feel like some people might have listened to what we've chatted about, and they're like, "Wow, like, they got it figured out, like, they're living in big cities, they North America, they have, like, good jobs, they found, like, their family values," but I feel like it was such
Yeah.
a chaotic journey to get here.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Absolutely. And,
Yeah.
it's all about, like, manifesting, right? Like, live the life you wanna live, I guess.
Yeah. I think we like chatted a bit about this before our podcast about just talking about like, all the choices that our grandparents and then parents and then now that we make have an
Mhm.
impact on who we are today, right?
Mhm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I would say that we are the product of the history that happened to us,
Yeah.
the Vietnam War and the policy choices that happened after created a path
Hmm.
for my aunt to get on that boat, get to that refugee camp, sponsor me 2 months after I was born, and then 11 years later, I somehow ended up in a little city in Oklahoma. And so it's like a butterfly effect,
Yeah.
right? Obviously, like, the agency that we have is always gonna be there,
Hmm.
but the upbringing that we get to bring with us is foundational in determining where we end up. So, I would say where we end up now is really not a coincidence, obviously compounded by hard work and by our parents' sacrifices, etcetera, but it's definitely like a concoction of all these factors.
When I first like lived on my own, I think I just have an existential crisis like every year, every day. I'm like, who am I? Where do I
Yep.
belong? Do I belong in Vietnam? Do I try hard to belong in Canada, which the consequence of potentially abandoning Vietnam. And it's all felt very
Mhm.
black or white, like I have to pick one path or the other. And over
Mhm.
time, I realized that no, like there is a path where you can have both, but it does come with compromises and it does come with giving up certain beliefs or certain rituals that you might not be able to celebrate as often, but it doesn't mean that
Yep.
you're letting go of one or the other. Other questions like how has being Vietnamese and being a woman benefited for your career and the challenges too?
So great question. I think there's so much to discuss, at the intersection of being a Vietnamese woman and being a career professional in a Western setting. I think the benefits are numerous, right? There's this built-in diversity of viewpoints that is possible because you're raised in a very different environment. And
Mm,
so you're kind of taught to defend yourself, to make these negotiations at home with your parents who hail from a vastly different time. So I think that is a given. And I would say some of the qualities that are often touted highly in Asian cultures, but are often not prioritized in Western career spaces
Mm.
can be very beneficial, especially at the very beginning of your career. Things like listening more and speaking less. That is something my dad loves to tell me, like, kiểu như là, cười nhiều nói ít. You know? It helps you to really foster a positive impression more often than not, and to
Mhm.
avoid sticky etiquette situation when you're out and about getting lunches with
Yeah.
C-suite partners, for example. Something else is evidently, I met you through this network called Overseas Vietnamese.
Yeah.
Be it in New York, I've gotten to meet with so many amazing, accomplished Vietnamese American or Asian American professionals. And just the relatability of that
Mhm.
has been so opened up so many opportunities, not just personally, but for Hồng Dao in
Yeah.
our various collaborations with Vietnamese brands, for
Yeah.
example. So that is another built-in feature. But I would say, some of the challenges, which I feel very viscerally toward, it's one of them you might relate is sort of this perceived distance between you as like an intern or like a junior professional and somebody at the higher up level, right?
Yeah.
Like have you felt that before?
Yeah, I think I still feel that to this day. I think the power dynamic, right? I feel intimidated when I talk to someone who's directors, VPs, C-suites level. I have nothing to say. You tell me what you want me to
Yes.
do, and then I'll do it. I've been very lucky to work in organizations that is like very inclusive, generally very flat hierarchy, and so they do encourage you to speak up. So that has been really nice. But still,
Mhm.
back of my mind, I'm like, I have nothing to contribute. Let's talk about their kids. Let's talk about anything
Literally.
else. Yeah, it's very scary. Or like when they ask like, what do you think, Mia? I'm like, I don't know. What do you think?
Okay, that makes me so relieved because I thought I was the only one.
Yeah,
Like, I fold so quickly when someone
yeah,
pushes against my point. I'm like, "Yes,
yeah,
you're right." Like,
yeah,
disregard everything I ever said.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly, and I think I've been very lucky to have managers very early in my, career where they really respect what I have to say, and if anything, like, they really push me to get my words out instead of like, "Oh, like, I think this is right," and they're like, "Okay, but, like, how? Like, tell me what you're thinking." And then from
Yeah.
there, I'm able to speak up more often and,
Mhm.
really kind of stand my ground, and it's not like
Mhm.
to say that you will always be right or always be wrong, but it's the idea of you have strong conviction and you trust that you have opinions and you trust in the way that you analyze problems
Yes.
to contribute.
I love that, and I love this growth for us.
Yeah.
Working at Google, I run into the same issue, right? Like, sometimes my coworkers would ask me to clarify
Mhm.
something that I wrote down, and I would perceive that as, like, a criticism, and I would get
Yeah, me
so
too.
intimidated,
Yeah,
and I'm like, "Oh my god, did I
I'm
say something
wrong.
s stupid?"
Yeah,
Yeah, but sometimes it's simply a question,
yeah,
and I'm starting to realize that, I'm working on that.
yeah.
Um, but I would say even though I came to the US quite early, that is
Mhm.
a quality that is almost innate
Yeah,
within me,
yeah,
from a very young age. So I would
yeah,
say, um, you know, no matter how young you came, it is definitely something to work on,
yeah,
in a professional setting.
yeah. How were you able to stand up and change? How they talk about if someone challenge or ask for clarification questioned, our default reaction would be like, "You're right, let me change my view."
Yeah.
Um, what did it take for you to change that mindset and that default?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question, and it can be extremely hard to
Mhm,
not react or respond according to that first instinct. But I would say it is something that requires time and practice. I think having like a environment similar to you where coworkers are the hierarchy is quite flat. The workplace conventions are pretty informal. It's a tech
mhm,
company. and my boss is like female and she's very supportive. That is really critical ingredients
Yeah.
for it for personal develop or professional development
Mm.
in that sense. Whenever I receive some sort of questions like that, right? I try not to jump to the worst conclusion anymore. Take a deep breath, right? We'll go back through my notes, through my work to re-verify that my thought process is in line with a certain logic, right? As long as you are able
Mhm.
to explain your thought process, that's like 80% of the battle, and just build up that confidence that you are capable, and, you know, understand that the imposter syndrome, which is really what it is at the end of the day, is just that. It is a syndrome that a lot of us kind of fall prey to, but it doesn't reflect the true level of competence that you are,
Yeah.
and this reason you were hired. So,
Yeah. I really like those very tactical tips. Another tips that I love to add to that is it's
mm,
okay to just say, you know what, I don't have the answer for you right now. Let me follow up
yes.
with you after the meeting. I think that has been very helpful because I'm currently working product marketing manager and I
Mhm,
have to be in a lot of rooms with C suites and directors, right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
they'll ask you the most random questions. And in the first few meetings, I remember just, like, freaking out. I'm like,
Yeah.
like, I don't know, and then you, like, end up
What?
giving, like, an answer that is unjustifiable to what you actually know, and so it's
Yeah.
okay to take a pause and be like, "You know what? Like, CEO, like, I don't have an answer for you right now, but let me get back to you on that, and then make sure that you follow up."
Mhm.
I think that's, like, a very professional way to handle a situation like that. You mentioned take a deep breath and then trust that you have the information that you need, and
Yep.
even if you don't have the information that you need, then trust that you have the framework and, like, the capability to find the answers. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I definitely agree with you in the sense that you don't have to have all the answers. You can always say, "Let me get back to you,"
Yeah.
and that is always the better response, right? And I was curious, I you know, obviously, it's so important to get our work right, um, and to show our competence in the workplace,
Mhm.
right? But do you kind of view, like, success in the workplace as sort of like a non-negotiable? Like, do you think that that is something that Viet people specifically kind of
Mm.
prize or views as like a defining quality? How do you view
Yeah.
success in your
Yeah.
experience?
Oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts about that.
Love.
Um, okay, so how do I define success? There's a lot of school of thoughts about what
Mhm,
success means, and
mhm,
the common response about definition of success has been like, it comes from within, happiness comes from within, and that all this material thing you need to detach, right? Buddhism is all about detaching from the materials. And while I do think that is true, I do think that the popular definition of success, career, money, having a home, as
mhm,
immigrants, I don't think that it's one will ever stop chasing those things. I think that is just so in it in us because we immigrated, we uproot. And so these are the material safety net that we'll always be chasing after. Money can buy happiness, but without money, life will be very hard. So I do think that acknowledge that it's okay to be chasing after this popular definition of success and like more of a materialistic definition of success, but
mhm,
also know this should be like your second priority because as first priority for me is actually like harmony and at peace. And I think that success is actually something that is very private to you.
mhm,
It's the feeling of feeling at peace of the life that you currently have. Do you have a healthy routine? Do you have supportive community? Do you have three
mhm,
close friends that you can go to and call whenever you need? How is your relationship with your parents and are they happy? Is there room to for improvement and to strengthen that family bond? That's my
and it's
thoughts.
hard to find that balance.
Yeah.
No, I totally understood what you were
Yeah.
saying, and you are so real about the fact that, you can wax poetic all you want about success being
Mhm.
happiness within or whatever. To put it frankly, I think that that is rich people propaganda to stop you from
Yeah.
seeking more out of them.
Yeah. Making more
And
money. Like, they don't want you to
yeah,
climb up and join them.
they
Mhm.
don't want more taxes.
Yeah.
That's why. But respect to Buddha, I definitely understand, but I think that the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is the perfect illustration that
Mm.
in order to achieve like true happiness, true actualization, right? You need a base of material needs to be met.
Mhm.
To me, it means giving my parents the freedom to quit work,
Yep.
to be secure enough financially, to do what they're on earth to do, right? They're not on earth to get in the factory 9 hours a day.
Yep.
That that is a huge grounding point that I've been trying to propagate in my own life in the sense that I understand that I'm very privileged to be in this
Mhm.
position to make relatively more money than a lot of people. And
Yeah.
I understand that, you know, a lot of people aren't afforded the same path toward this success that we define as freedom, right? And a lot of that has to do with the policy choices that are in place that
Mm.
disenfranchise certain people.
Yep.
And so to me, success means sort of this safety net for all. And I always try to advocate toward that. And I try to like
Mhm.
think of my success as not just an individual's climbing a ladder, but rather we pull up everyone be to enjoy this the riches that we were able to reap just next to us.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's a collective effort, right? And it's a
Mhm.
collective
Absolutely.
benefit. I think the other thing that I have a thought about with success is I actually think that the riskiest thing that you could do in your life is to become like everyone else because
Mhm.
it means that you never find yourself. And my definition of success that I've shared
Mhm.
and yours and everyone else might not be the same. Take what you
Mhm.
can, but also form your own definition and own it,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
valid. So it sounds like to me your definition of happiness is like being authentic
Yeah.
to what you really
Be
want.
true to yourself. Like, be honest with yourself about, like, what you really want, and it might also come with disappointing a lot of people in your life. My grandma wanted me to have kids at, like, 25, and now I'm, like, 27, 20, like, 27. I'm like, I don't think she's happening. Not right now. It's like a constant negotiation with the people closest to you, if they're your family, to be like, "Yeah, like, it might happen, it might not happen, but, like, it has to be something that is true to me."
Yeah, I relate to that so much. But, maybe that's like one of the maybe not positive, but something that we are afforded, right?
Mhm.
Being in the
Yeah,
Western school, because maybe we would get a little bit more judgment if we
yeah,
were working women in our late 20s
yeah.
without like a boo.
Without a booth.
No.
Yeah.
But, I think something to consider is my mom visited me in New York a few weeks ago, and she was loving it, like, she was in
Yeah.
awe of the glitz and the glam, and something that she said just offhand was, if she had the opportunity, she would have lived in New York for a few years. She would live here, nghĩa là nếu
Mhm.
mà có cơ hội á là mẹ sẽ ở đây vài năm, right?
Mhm.
And that just made me so sad all of a sudden because it kind of amplifies that we have so much opportunity compared to, like,
Yeah.
our parent or moms
Yeah.
before us. My mom definitely wants me a little more settled too, not in my personal life, but she may not, but, I might not have had this opportunity had
Yeah.
I followed that path similar to
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's always 2 sides to the
Yeah.
coin.
Yeah, and be grateful for the cards that you were dealt with, and always try to take care of the people that got you there, right?
Definitely.
Okay, has been so fun. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Ca Dao, for this wonderful, very deep, very insightful conversation. So before we wrap up, I usually have end off with a little bit of Vietnamese outro, especially for
Love.
if my guests are fluent in Vietnamese. So we're
I'm
gonna
fluent.
switch. So we're gonna switch, đổi mode. So, so trước khi kết lại cuộc trò chuyện hôm nay thì chúng mình sẽ đến với màn thả phanh. So what that means is, chị sẽ đặt ra 3 câu hỏi chớp nhoáng và Ca Dao sẽ phải đưa ra câu trả lời nhanh nhất có thể và không được lưỡng
OK,
lự, không được chần chừ, được không? Sẵn
OK,
sàng chưa?
không chần chờ, sẵn sàng.
Okay. Okay. So câu hỏi thứ nhất là một sai lầm trong cuộc sống mà đã giúp Ca Dao trưởng thành.
Sai lầm trong cuộc sống mà giúp em trưởng thành là, oh my gosh, em, đi du lịch với bạn, xong rồi em, kiểu như là, chọn, chọn sai bạn. Lý do thì
That needs like another separate podcast. Okay.
mà nhưng em học rất nhiều từ chính em và với cách để mà du lịch lần sau để mà vui hơn. Ừm.
Okay, câu hỏi số 2 là slogan trong cuộc sống của Ca Dao hiện tại là gì?
Slogan trong cuộc sống của em hiện tại là, "Nếu có thời gian thì hãy luôn về thăm gia đình."
Và câu hỏi cuối cùng là một cuốn sách của tác giả Việt Nam mà Ca Dao muốn giới thiệu cho mọi người.
Em muốn giới thiệu cho mọi người một cuốn sách gọi là "Cánh đồng bất tận"
Ừm,
bởi hình như,
Mia
tác
này.
giả là Nguyễn Thị Tư hả? Nó trúng giải Diều Vàng hay là gì đó, nhưng mà cái cuốn sách đó, mỗi lần em đọc cuốn sách đó là em có cảm giác như là tuổi thơ với lại đất nước ùa về với mình. Cho nên nếu
Ừm.
mà mình muốn được nhớ Việt Nam hay là muốn được giới thiệu về, đất nước, con người Việt Nam á, thì cuốn sách đó gọi là Chef's Kiss.
Chef's kiss. All right, so that's a wrap. Thank you so much, Keza, for being here. How can the audience support your community initiatives?
Great question. Please follow Hồng Dao NYC on Instagram and stay tuned for the
Yeah,
next club in
for
New
the
York
next
City.
dinner club. And so to the audience, thank you so much for supporting the Boss Babes. So please follow us on Instagram, YouTube, or Spotify. And thanks for tuning in. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.